Some trails appear only when they're ready to be seen, and once you step in, something steps out with you. You're listening to ASMR 404 Found. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you're reading this, I need you to understand this isn't just a hiking story. This isn't just another missing hiker case or a ghost tale whispered in campfire circles. This is a warning, a last effort to make sense of what I saw at Devil's Backbone, to keep someone else from stepping into a place that doesn't want to be walked on. A place that pulls you in and doesn't let go. Devil's Backbone Trailhead sits just west of Loveland, Colorado. It's a strange slice of land rising out of the dry hills like a fossil spine. Sharp sandstone ridges stretch like vertebrae frozen mid-twist. Locals give it that name because of the way the rocks curl and cut into the sky. Some people say it looks like a prehistoric animal buried, bleeding through the earth. Others say it's the back of something still alive, something waiting. I went out there with 3 friends, Lena, Chris, and Dev. It was early October, just cool enough at night to need extra layers, but still warm enough. In the day for long hikes, we weren't amateurs. We'd done Zion Arches, Grand Tetons, and deep backcountry in Montana. But this one was different. It was Lena's idea. She had a thing for haunted hikes, weird trails that weren't in the guidebooks, places that had stories attached to them. She pulled up Devil's Backbone from a thread buried on a survivalist forum. There were rumors, disappearances 8 since the early 90s. No bodies ever found, no gear, no signs of struggle, just gone. But Lena grinned like it was a scavenger hunt, like the place was daring her to show up and prove it wrong. We loaded up on Friday afternoon and drove out from Denver, reached the Trailhead parking lot around 5. It was half empty. The sky was turning peach and lavender, and the ridgeline looked like teeth against it. There was a carved wooden sign that read Devil's Backbone, open space. But someone had scratched deep lines across it. Fresh to the wood around the slashes was pale, like it had been done this week below, that someone had nailed a separate piece of old fencing plank to the post. It wasn't official, no city markings, just hand-painted red letters. Do not hike after dark, they come when the bones wake. Chris laughed, said it was probably Bud joke or some edgy artist's idea of a statement. Dev didn't laugh. He stood still, staring at it, until I tapped his shoulder, and he flinched like I'd startled him from a nightmare. We hiked in just a mile or so, and set up camp in a shallow wash surrounded by rock spires. The tent spots were soft with dry grass, and the stars were starting to blink on. Lena insisted we pitch near the Devil's Eye. It's what she called the natural arch near the center of the spine, a weird oval shape, carved by erosion or time, or whatever else bends this land, she said. The trail curved around it in a full loop, but the loop wasn't official. No markings, no trail signs, just whispers and old maps. That night, something felt off. The silence was too deep, you know, that kind of silence where you can hear the blood behind your eyes, the kind where even the fire crackling sounds muted. Like the whole place was listening. I woke up around 2 to the sound of movement outside the tent, not rustling, like an animal, more rhythmic, almost like someone walking slowly through gravel. I unzipped the flap. Lena wasn't inside. Her sleeping bag was empty, still, still zipped all the way up. I stepped out. She was 20 feet away, standing in the open, facing the arch. Her back was rigid, arms hanging loose, her hair swayed, even though there wasn't any wind. I whispered her name once, twice. She didn't turn when I got closer. I saw her lips moving, but no sound coming out. I said Lena again, and she finally turned to me. Her eyes looked off, unfocused, like she wasn't fully in her body. She said the land was breathing, that she could feel it through the soles of her feet, that the arch wasn't stone, it was something else, something older, something watching. Guy pulled her gently and walked her back to the tent. She didn't resist, but she kept glancing over her shoulder. The next morning, we tried to shake it off. We joked over oatmeal. Chris threw a stick at Dev, who was trying to meditate. It felt normal. For a few hours, sunlight always makes things feel less haunted. Round 10, we packed light gear and set off on the full loop. Lena's map showed a trail that circled the entire formation. It would take us close to the Devil's Eye and back around. Along the west ridge, it was about 12 miles, total 2 miles. In the air got thicker, like elevation changed, even though we weren't climbing. The sunlight dimmed to like something was filtering it above us, but the sky was clear. That's when Dev stopped walking. He said we were being followed. I asked what he meant. He said he'd been hearing footsteps behind us for 20 minutes, but every time he turned around, there was nothing. I looked back myself and saw only trail bending behind us and the distant hills. Lena told him to relax, said it was probably our own echo. She was smiling again, that strange half-smile she wore since last night. I didn't trust that smile. At mile 5, the trail split. It wasn't marked. The left side curved up a narrow pass lined with twisted cedar trees. The right side dropped into a wash, shaded by rock. The map didn't show a fork, but Lena insisted the right way was through the wash. She pointed to a cairn someone had built to mark the turn. Chris shrugged and followed Dev, and I hesitated but went with them. We walked another 30 minutes before Chris stopped and said it smelled weird. I breathed in and caught it, to that sharp iron scent like pennies in a wet fist. The air was still, dry, but the smell was thick and stuck to the back of my throat. Then we saw something ahead, a pile of torn fabric caught on a bush, a red nylon sleeve. I thought maybe it was trash, until Dev picked it up and found a patch on it. It was an SR jacket. Search and Rescue Colorado Division. He flipped it over, and the other sleeve was shredded, not cut, like torn open. No blood, but the scent grew stronger. Lena didn't say anything, she just kept walking. Chris hesitated, then followed. We reached a clearing and found the loop had bent too far. We should have been nearing the backside of the arch, but we were circling again. The terrain looked familiar, too familiar. Dev dropped his pack and said we'd passed that same boulder an hour ago. I recognized, put it too. I'd taken a photo of it earlier, the same split down the middle and a bird. Skull tucked inside. We weren't going in circles by accident. Something was shifting the trail beneath us. Chris took out his GPS tracker, but the signal blinked in, and out it showed a zigzagging mess with our location flipping between coordinates. Dev dropped a trail marker, a bright green bandana tied to a cedar branch. We walked on for 15 minutes, turned around, it was gone, not moved, gone like it had never been there. The sun dropped fast, shadows spilled over the rocks in long, unnatural lines, and then Lena started humming a slow, dragging tune. Like a lullaby sung in reverse. I asked her what it was. She blinked like she didn't hear. Medev stepped in front of her to stop her. She snapped out of it, but looked at him with a face I didn't recognize. Not just confusion, something darker. Like she didn't know him at all. Then she turned and started walking faster toward the ridge, picking up speed. Saying nothing, Chris called after her. Dev tried to grab her arm, but she slipped past him. We followed her back up the trail, and that's when we saw the arch again. The devil's eye, she reached it, arms open, like she was welcoming something. A gust of hot wind rushed out of it, not from behind it, from inside the stone, like it had lungs. And then Lena was gone, not like she jumped. Not like she vanished into shadow. 1 second she stood in the arch, the next she wasn't there. There was no sound. No flash, no scream, just gone. Chris screamed. Dev dropped to his knees. I couldn't move. The arch didn't look like stone anymore. It shimmered like skin, pulled tight and quivering, and something inside it moved. We didn't speak for almost 5 minutes after Lena vanished. None of us knew how to say what we had just seen. Dev's mouth was moving, but no sound came out, like he was trying to convince himself it didn't happen. Chris stood frozen, still facing the arch. His eyes were glassed over, fixed, like he was watching something no one else could see. Finally moved, reached for Chris's arm and pulled him back, and he didn't resist. I kept repeating her name under my breath, not because I thought she would answer, but because the silence was so heavy. I needed to say something, anything. The sun was almost gone. The wind had turned cold, biting at our necks. Dev said we had to go back to the campsite, that we should mark the way and leave before the dark set in. But the trail behind us was gone. Not overgrown, not faded, just erased. Like the dirt had folded in on itself and buried our steps. Priest said it looked different but familiar. Like the land had looped again and was showing us the same. Seen from another angle, we tried heading west, using the ridge as our guide. But the terrain kept changing. Trees that hadn't been there now lined the trail. Boulders we'd passed once now blocked new paths. The entire landscape was curling in, tear on itself, like it was trying to keep us close. I kept glancing at the arch, expecting Lena to come walking back through it, like none of this had happened. But it didn't move. It just breathed slow and steady, like a living thing at rest. We finally decided to climb to a high point and look for a vantage. Chris went first, then me, then Dev. It took nearly 30 minutes to get to a shelf overlooking the southern valley. The town lights of Loveland should have been visible beyond the ridge, but there was nothing, just rolling black hills and a horizon that looked wrong, like it bent too far, like we were inside something too big to see fully. Dev cursed under his breath and said we were being played with like rats in a maze. Chris dropped to sit and held his head in his hands. The smell was back, thick and iron heavy. When we saw the figures far below in the valley, lined up in a long, slow-moving line, a procession of people walking single file toward the ridge. They weren't holding lights, they weren't carrying gear, just dark shapes moving together, all walking the same pace. all walking without sound. I counted at least 15, maybe more. They weren't talking or even turning their heads. It was like they weren't even aware of their own movement. Chris whispered something, then stood up too fast. He lost his balance and stumbled but caught himself. He said Lena was with them, that he saw her in the line that we needed to go get heard. Ev grabbed his arm, told him, "No, that whatever those things were, they weren't alive, not like we were, and if we got closer, they'd see us." Toei believed him. Stayed frozen on that ledge, watching the figures march across the valley and vanish behind a ridge. That's when the air changed again. A deep pressure in the chest, like we'd descended underwater. All sound went thin and hollow, and then came the scream, not from the valley, not from a human voice, from the mountain, a long, aching wail that came from deep within. The backbone itself, it wasn't natural, not an animal, not wind. It was the kind of scream that rattles the inside of your bones and leaves your teeth cold. Chris started muttering that we were going to die out there, that the place had opened up and swallowed her. And we were next. I shook him hard, told him to shut up and help me think. Dev suggested we stay at elevation until morning. Wait for first light, then try to track the sun and navigate east. We built a small fire using what little kindling we had and took turns keeping watch. None of us really slept, just leaned against stone and waited. During my watch, I saw something in the sky, not stars, not satellites, but shifting holes in the dark, like the sky itself had bruises, patches, where the night bled deeper. Something moved between them, long and slow, not with wings, not with legs, something that didn't move like an animal. Something older than time, with joints that bent the wrong way, and a hunger that felt like gravity. Closed my eyes tight and didn't open them until Chris tapped me and said morning had come, but it hadn't. The sky had only lightened a shade, not sunrise. Just a pale dead glow that gave no heat. We packed fast and started heading down, following a dried-up wash that cut into the ridge, hoping it led out. The trail stayed unfamiliar, twisting us further from the arch, but never toward anything. No midday came without a change in the sky. No sun, just that pale, sick light overhead. The wind stopped completely, the kind of stillness that made our footsteps sound like thunder. Dev walked ahead, scouting the path, Chris in the middle, me behind. We didn't talk any more than we saw something ahead, person standing perfectly still, just off the trail, dressed in faded blue jeans and a yellow flannel shirt. They didn't move when we approached, no reaction, no acknowledgement. Dev stepped closer and called out, "Hey, you okay?" The figure didn't respond. As we got near, we realized it wasn't a person at all. It was a shell, an empty skin, standing upright, hollow like a snake skin, but human, a full-sized human skin, like it had been shed in one motion and left upright with the clothes still hanging on it. There were no eyes in the sockets, no blood, no smell, just an absence. Chris vomited on the trail. Dev stared at it for a long time, then whispered that it was fresh, that it hadn't been here earlier, that something had left it. For Yusi looked closer and saw something tucked into the shirt. Pocketed. Was Lena's phone still charged? Still blinking with a new notification, one photo added to gallery. Opened it. It was a picture of us taken from behind, from above all. 3 of us walking along the trail with the arch in the distance, but none of us had taken it. Looked round the rocks. Above nothing moved, but the wind was back cold and whispering our names in voices that weren't ours. We ran down through the wash, across sharp stone and bone-white roots that clawed from the soil. Trees leaned toward us, whispering with dry leaves. We didn't stop until our legs gave out. That night we found a cave just wide enough to crawl into. Too low to stand, but safe from open sky. We squeezed in, lit the last emergency light, and braced ourselves. Chris broke down, said we were dead already, said Lena was never. Lena out there, said the thing that vanished in the arch took her shape just to lure us deeper. Dev said nothing, just stared at the cave wall, tracing something with his finger over and over. Again he was drawing the arch from memory perfectly, and then he whispered, "Inside us, now we brought it with us." We didn't sleep that night, not really. The cave was too shallow, too tight. The air inside was stale, but warmer than outside. Still, we took turns holding the light to keep the darkness out. Chris kept pacing inside that small space, back and forth, muttering pieces of things he remembered, or maybe dreamt. Dev sat in the corner, drawing the arch into the dirt with a stick over and over. I kept thinking about that photo on Lena's phone. Us walking, us being watched, not just watched. Followed. Morning never came, not the way it should have. There was no sunrise, no gold or orange, no shadows stretching from trees. Just that same pale, dull light that wasn't coming from any direction. The forest around us looked warped, like we sunk under the skin of the land, and the bones beneath were pressing up to meet us. We packed slowly. None of us really expected escape, but we had to try. Dev led again. We followed what looked like a game trail, a narrow run of dirt between broken cedar trunks and crumbling ridges. Everything looked twisted. The trees bent away from the trail. The rocks leaned toward it like something was guiding us or trapping us. Then we found another marker, a bright red bandana tied around a dead branch, same color and shape as the one Dev dropped 2 days before. But we had never walked this way, not once. Chris refused to move. He said we were circling again. He said we weren't in Colorado anymore, that we weren't even on Earth, that this trailhead was a gate, and Lena opened it, and now it wouldn't close. I told him to shut up and help me think. Dev said nothing, but picked up the bandana and tied it to his wrist. We moved on. The smell came back, thicker than before. Not just copper, this time wetter. Like something old and rotted had been cut open far away, but the stink was finding its way to us, inch by inch. Then came the sound. At first we thought it was the wind again. But this sound had rhythm, like breathing, slow and deep, but from the earth itself. We climbed a slope and saw another arch, smaller, made of twisted wood, not stone. It looked new, like it had grown just for us. Beyond it was a clearing, and in that clearing were the rest of them figures, like the ones we saw before, walking slowly in a long line, but these ones were closer. They circled the clearing like a ritual. And in the center, Lena, she was kneeling, hands on the ground, hair wild and hanging, but she was smiling, not with her lips, with her whole face, with something wearing her face. She looked up and saw us, and I swear I felt my legs start to move without permission, like her gaze was pulling the muscles behind my knees. Chris screamed. He turned and ran. Dev shouted his name, but it was too late. The figures turned to all of them as one. They turned their heads and followed Chris with eyes that didn't blink. Then their legs moved in perfect sync. No sound, just speed. A dozen of them following one boy through the brush. We heard Chris scream once, then nothing. Dev grabbed my hand and we dropped to the dirt, crawled backward behind a ridge, holding our breath until the clearing was silent again. When we looked back, Lena was gone. So was the wooden arch. We walked for hours after that, no talking, no ideas left. Dev looked older, his hair gray at the roots, his hands trembling. We followed a slope that looked more familiar than the others, and at the bottom we saw it, a sign, wooden, cracked, faded lettering, Devil's Backbone. Open space. We froze, stared, then Ron we hit the gravel lot by late afternoon, or what passed for afternoon in that pale dead sky. Our car was still there, dusty but untouched. I don't remember driving. I remember the road, the lines in the pavement, the way the sky didn't change. We didn't speak until the Denver city lights broke over the horizon like a wave that was 5 days ago. Haven't seen Dev since he stopped responding. Blocked me on everything I called his apartment. His landlord said he moved out, left in the middle of the night, didn't say a word. Lena's phone was gone from my bag the next morning. No trace of it, no photos, not even a call log, like it had never existed. Chris' body was found 2 days ago, over 100 miles from Devil's Backbone, along a creek near Boulder. Naked, no injuries, no signs of trauma, just dead, empty. They ruled it exposure. Said he wandered off trail and got lost, but he had no scratches on his feet, no dirt, just clean bare skin, like he had been placed there. I know what I saw. I know what followed us out of that place. I feel it at night in the corners of my apartment, behind the windows, in reflections that last too long. Sometimes I wake up to scratching, not at the door, not at the window, inside the walls. Sometimes I find dirt on the floor, bones in the sink, tiny bird-like. Sometimes I dream of her, Lena, still kneeling, still smiling. I've driven past Devil's Backbone twice since. I keep telling myself I won't stop, I won't pull in, I won't walk the trail again. But the sky above it always looks wrong, like it's bending to make space for something larger, like it's waiting. I don't know how to end this. I don't think I can. If you're reading this, if you ever think about visiting that trail, don't go near the arch. Don't walk the loop. Don't breathe when the wind changes. Don't answer if something calls your name. The land is awake now, and it remembers you. You should never hike a trail that isn't on the map, especially not one that shows up in the dark. I am writing this because I've tried everything else. Therapists, local authorities, even park rangers who looked me in the eye and told me the trail I was on doesn't exist. I know what I saw. I know what followed me back. This all happened on the Tennessee side of the Unicoi Mountains. I was out on a solo backpacking trip in the Cherokee National Forest. Just me, my gear, and a plan to disappear from the noise of the world for 5 days. It was early October, just as the leaves were beginning to bleed colors. The air smelled of dying foliage, moss, and something colder beneath it. A kind of clean rot, if that makes any sense. Something old waking. Pi parked at the Far Gap trailhead and followed the Benton McKay Trail into the interior. Everything was normal, peaceful. Even I kept my compass, GPS, printed maps, and a hand-drawn route planned for the full circuit. Nothing risky, no off-trail. Nonsense that was, until night 2, camped out near Slick Rock Creek. The fire was dying, and I'd just zipped up inside my bivvy. When I heard footsteps, they weren't animal, not the shuffle of paws or snorting of deer. They were slow, measured, booted, crunching leaves in a rhythm that didn't belong out there. I sat up, unzipped the bivvy, but saw no light, no silhouette. Only the quiet hush of wind moving through trees. I stayed up, knife in hand, listened for hours, but nothing came close. Again morning brought fog, thick and low, like a blanket spread across the forest floor. I couldn't see more than 20 feet ahead. Still, I packed and hiked east toward the Joyce-Kilmer side, but I never got there round. Midday, I passed a small wooden sign nailed crookedly to a rotting pine. The words were carved deep into the grain like someone used a hunting knife. It said Red Ash GAP1. To me, below that, someone had scratched another line into the wood, barely readable, but I made it out, you see it, because it sees you there. Was no red ash gap on any of my maps, no mention in forums, no markers, nothing but the trail was clear, worn tight, bound, and winding between tall hemlocks, and I don't know why, but I took it. Something in me said go, like it whispered. Low, deep knot in my ears, in my blood. The moment I stepped off the main trail, the air changed, colder still, like the forest was holding its breath. The silence was unnatural. Even the birds stopped. No crows, no insects, just the sound of my boots and my heartbeat rising. The trail narrowed. The trees on either side leaned in there, branches bare, even though the season hadn't reached full decay. I walked for maybe 30 minutes before I reached the gap. It was a flat clearing surrounded by dead trees. Perfectly circular, too perfect. At the center stood a fire ring made of black stone. Unusual stone, not local, not granite, not shale. This was dark red, porous, almost volcanic. Inside the fire ring, ashes, fresh, still warm. Someone had been there recently. That's when I noticed the smell, burnt hair, and something sweet beneath it, like sap or decay. Turned to leave, but the trail behind me was gone. There was no path, just dense brush and thicket like it had never existed. Circled the clearing, looked for the direction I came from, but every tree looked the same. Tall, dead, twisting toward the center like the fire pit was gravity itself. Then came the whisper, which it wasn't from outside, it was inside my ears, behind my teeth. A voice so dry, it crackled. You saw it. Now it sees why. Turned fast, but no one was there, only shadows twitching at the edge of my vision. I ran straight into the trees. Branches tore at my jacket, thorns dug into my arms, but I didn't care. I ran until my lungs ached and the forest around me changed. The trees grew wider again, the light returned, but something followed. I made camp that night in a tight spot between boulders. No fire, no light, just me in the dark end. I could hear it shuffling, breathing, not close, but not far enough. When I awoke, there were prints around my bivvy. Bare feet, small but not childlike, not human. The toes were too long, the stride too wide. And in the center of the clearing, someone had drawn a spiral. In Ashai broke camp in silence. Didn't eat, didn't speak, didn't rest, just moved, trying to find my way back to Benton McKay. But the compass spun, the GPS blinked with no reception. And the forest grew unfamiliar. Again mid-afternoon, I passed a tree with carvings in the bark, long vertical slices like tally marks. But they were deep, too deep for a blade, more like claws. There were hundreds of them, all centered around one bare oak, and at its base a backpack, cold, weather-worn. Half-rotted and sided journal pages stuck together from moisture, but I read what I could, the last entry. Scrawled in thick black ink, read the red ash burns when it chooses, not when you do the trail only. Bends when you give it something, it wants something back. It always wants something back. The next page was torn out, blood-soaked tie. Left it. Ran again. Kept running. I didn't find the main trail. I stumbled out of the forest onto a dirt road. I didn't recognize, flagged down a truck heading to Tellico Plains. The driver asked if I was part of the search party. Said no. What search, he'd said. Some college kid went missing 3 days ago, hiking solo, last seen near Slick Rock Creek, same place I'd camped. They hadn't found him yet. That was a week ago since I got home. Weird things started happening. Ash in the sink my dog won't go near. My pack lights flicker at night. And I hear whispering from the trees behind my apartment. I haven't been back to the woods, but I feel it watching, waiting back to follow me. Bye. Didn't sleep for days after coming home. Kept the lights on in every room. Unpacked my gear, just enough to burn the journal I'd found. But the ashes wouldn't catch. They clumped sticky wet, like the paper had blood still inside. E.T. threw it away, but the next morning it was sitting in the sink dry, opened to that last page again, the one about giving something back. I stayed with my sister for a while, told her I needed to get out of the city. She lives north of Knoxville, small town, quiet, surrounded by woods. Bad idea. The second night there I woke up with red ash on my chest. Thin powder, just enough to notice, not enough to explain. I checked the door, still locked, no windows open, but I swear the air smelled like firewood and teeth. I started digging online. Red ash gap. The phrase didn't exist in any official trail record, not on Gaia, not on AllTrails, not on USGS. But I found a single mention buried in an archived blog from 2004, written by a ranger who'd gone missing near Calderwood. The last post said, "There are places in the Appalachians older than maps, older than stories. The trees grow wrong where it sleeps, it waits, it doesn't want worship, it wants memory." The post ended there, no comments. No trace of the author. After that I emailed the local forest office. Got a reply 3 days later from a seasonal worker. He told me, off the record, that red ash gap is a rumor. Rangers won't talk about it. Locals pretend it's just a myth, but he said something strange happened back in 1997. A rescue team looking for 2 missing campers reported a fire in the woods. Smoke, orange glow, they tracked it to a clearing with a ring of stone and nothing else. No flames, no heat, just warm ash, no wind. But ashes drifting through the air. Team came back. Changed, 2 of them. Quit the service within a week. I had a breakdown. Refused to ever enter the forest again. The 4th died in a motel room. In Robbinsville, burn marks on the mattress. But no fire, only ashes. That's when I realized I wasn't just being followed. I was marked. I booked a cabin in Tapaco, right along the river. Figured if it had to come for me, it would have to cross water. Old rules, old protections. The first night there, I heard scraping on the walls, not outside. Inside, between the wood and the drywall like fingers. Long, slow, tracing symbols in the framing. The morning, a spiral was burned into the door. Just below the deadbolt, Ty checked the security camera I'd set up. It had shut off at 2:14 a.m., restarted. At 2:21, the gap showed nothing, but when I looked closely, frame by frame, I saw the last image before the cutter shape standing outside the window tall. Hunched, bent backward, no eyes but its mouth. It was open wide, too wide, like it had never closed before. Its arms were stretched out, not toward the door, toward the lens, like it knew it was being watched. Ty called. A local preacher, old guy, Southern Baptist, but with something else in his voice, something older, like he knew the land too well. He came to the cabin with a Bible, but also a box of red dirt bones, twigs tied with hair. He walked the perimeter, left a circle of iron shavings, then looked me in the eye and said, "You stepped into something that remembers walking." Before Godey asked what it wanted, he said, "Nothing you're ready to give." That night, the scratching stopped, but the dreams started in. The dream, I was back in the gap, kneeling hands in ash, and Lena was there, but not Lena. Her face kept shifting, her smile to large. She whispered, "Dig, dig, digi." Woke up choking on smoke. But the room was clear. The spiral on the door was gone. I drove back to the forest. He didn't pack gear. Just water, a flashlight, and a gift. My own memory, you see it, demands sacrifice. Not blood, but history. I walked the same trail back past Slick Rock, back toward where the sign had been. Wasn't there, but one found the trail again. Even without markers, even without scent to my feet, knew where to go. The path lead deeper, quieter. Even the crows stopped watching. Then, Bida. Now the trees surrounding it were all blackened, burned from the inside. Out the ring of stone had been disturbed. Someone else had been the ray. Tent pole lay broken, a boot half melted, and ashes everywhere. Stepped into the ring, the air buzzed like it was tasting me. Wetting guy dropped the photograph of me and my brother. Only copy, we were kids. Fishing, smiling. Spoke aloud, "You want a memory. Take it." The ashes stirred, lifted, spiraled around me. Then fell. Nothing else happened. No sound. No shift, but when I turned, the trail was back. I walked out, made it to the road, same road as before. But now it felt lighter, like something had accepted the offering. It's been a week there. Dreams are quieter. The scratching stopped, but every now and then ash still shows up in strange places. Once inside a light bulb, once inside my mouth. When I woke, I think it remembers me. Even if I paid the Torland, I think one day it's going to ask again. Red Ash Gap doesn't want worship. It wants witness. It wants you to see, and once you see, it will see you. I tried to return to normal life, went back to work, answered emails, talked about the weather, nodded when people asked if I was okay, but the truth is, Red Ash Gap never really let me go first. It was small things, seeing a figure out of the corner of my eye, never in mirrors, always in reflections. The rear view mirror when driving through tunnels, the black glass of my oven door, the window of a parked car, a face, blank, asking to be remembered. Then came the smell, ash and sugar, like something had been burned and sweetened. It would come in waves, at the bank, at the library, in an elevator with no one else inside. I stopped sleeping, tried sleeping pills, whiskey, cold floors. Nothing helped. The dreams came anyways. Same forest, same trail, but each time the gap was bigger and the ash deeper and the voices loudest. Sometimes they weren't just whispering. Sometimes they were calling names, my name, over and over, but wrong, bent, like it had been dragged through soil before being spoken. Moved apartments, north side of town, 5th floor, concrete on all sides. No trees for blocks didn't help them. First night there, I found a small red spiral drawn on the bathroom mirror. It was made of ash, wet still, fresh. I scrubbed it throughout the mirror, but that night I saw it again, this time on my ceiling. This time it was moving, just slowly turning, like it was alive. I booked a flight west. Thought distance might help. Chose Arizona, no trees, no moss, no Appalachian whispering. Desert, silence is different, still haunted, just less wet. I stayed in a small cabin south of Flagstaff, clean, dry, far from the forest. But it found me there. Toy woke up to red prints on the tile. Not footsteps, handprints, small too many fingers. Small too many fingers. Followed them to the door, opened it slowly outside. Silence, but in the dirt just beyond the porch, the spiral was burned into the earth. Again, same shape, same pattern, and something was standing just past it, not moving, not speaking, just waiting. I watched it for hours. It never blinked, it never turned until dawn. Then it was gone. I flew back east. I knew what I had to do. It wasn't done with me because I had only given it memory, not what it truly craved. Witnessed. There are stories older than fire of things that cannot exist unless they are seen, told, named. Remembered. I had to be the one who remembered, so I did what you're not supposed to do. I went back. Red Ash Gap doesn't always appear. It only calls when it's ready, but it called me back this time. I brought only a notebook, a voice recorder, a trail cam, and no intention of ever leaving Agunai. Followed the same route, the same rot in the air, the same silence in the trees, and then the sign was there. Again, crooked, half-rotted, but legible. Red Ash, GAP1. To me, you see it because it sees youth. This time, I whispered, I see youth. Trail opened like it had missed me. Deeper breathing. Guy walked with my head down, whispers brushing the back of my neck. My heart never slowed, not once, and at the center, the ring of stone. This time, it wasn't just ash inside. There were bones, small, polished, arranged in a circle, and something in the middle a face. Carved in bark, my face. The resemblance was perfect. Even the scar on my chin, it had made a mask of me. It had worn my face. Maybe it still was I. Set the recorder down, opened the notebook, and started to speak not prayers, not apologies. Testimony. I told it everything, every step, every mistake, every night since that first one. I gave it the story, gave it my voice, my name, my fear, and when I finished, the trees bowed, and the fire pit glowed not. Flames, just heat like breath, exhaled. Slowly, I left the recorder, left the notebook, left part of my end, walked back out, no spiral, followed, no face in glass, no handprints. On the floor, only silence, but not empty, resting, waiting for someone else to look too long at a path that isn't there. Waiting for the next pair of eyes, the next memory. I write this because it wants the story told. That's how it grows. That's how it feeds you. Don't have to believe me. But now you've read this, now you've seen it too.